Alright, this is my first video. First one that's long form. The Leo videos are just shorts. They're good, I like them, but this is why I have the channel. And it's going to be a kind of interesting one to start with in the current climate of things. It's about the story John Henry. A little bit of preface, a little bit of background. So if you don't know the story, basically this John Henry, he's a guy. Yeah, well, of course. He was born into like a big family with a lot of sickness, so there was a lot of like, oh man, we gotta work hard. Basically, imagine, self-made man, worked a lot, yada yada yada. He was skilled. His dad told him like, hey, just know these things how to work, and you'll work. Gosh, this is a great intro. And then there's a steam drill that comes in to take his job, and he's like, no, I'm gonna die with my hammer in my hand, or I'm gonna beat it. There's no in-between. Like, I'm not losing my job to this machine. He goes and has a competition, and, people gather around, and they're all cheering for John Henry, and it's him versus the machine, and he ends up getting through the mountain before the machine does, and he wins the contest. He wins. So then, what happens is, since he worked so hard to get through the mountain this one time and beat the machine in this contest, he dies shortly after from exertion. Be my guess, I don't know. But in the story, after he wins, he dies, and it depends on the version of the song. But I'm going off the Johnny Cash version. Then he tells his wife to pick up the hammer and hammer like he did so that she can provide for the kids. I think the real myth doesn't necessarily go that far into it. But anyway, now we're on to where I'm actually adding something and not just reciting a folktale. I think it's a very interesting myth because oh man, here comes this guy, he's full of it. I've read a lot of Carl Jung. I've read Carl Jung, right? And some other psychologists. And one of the things that interests me is his understanding of how myths are reflections of the cultures that spread them, and how the human mind its values are shaped by myth. And in this myth, it's a very interesting idea of how a man can go against an impersonal force, just in general, and how he'll choose his human dignity over, like, complying with that impersonal force, we'll say. But, there's some questions that come up, obviously. The steam drill, first off, not really a question, but what is the steam drill? What's its motive? Well, what makes it impersonal is it doesn't really have a motive. It doesn't know John exists. It doesn't know the situation, the context. All it knows is the job it's set out to do, and that's to steam drill steam. Not really. Use steam to drill. It's not really like a person, and that's what makes it impersonal. Literally, it's in the name. And the funny thing is, unlike a lot of stories, John dies essentially because of this contest. It is implied that he wouldn't have died, like this was a sacrifice he made. So that's where it gets like, okay, what? This is a myth, a folktale. I thought it's supposed to like kind of uplift people or like warn people. Those are like the two types. But it's kind of weird. It sits in that weird third place where it's saying like, oh, this guy, he was not going to get moved by an impersonal force. But he still succumbed to it, essentially. And it's supposedly like a very uplifting story, when if you look at it just from the like, railroads continued to become built by the steam drill. Like, in the long scale of time, John Henry lost. He died, and he ended up dying for something that ultimately kind of became, I don't want to say obsolete, but in his time it was a lot bigger of a deal than now in modern days, where rail is not really as big of a thing as it was back then. It's still useful, but it's you can see how, like, okay, his death is definitely a tragedy because it wasn't necessarily for like his greater cause so much as it was for his own personal cause, which was to not just sit back and let this machine, this impersonal force, dictate his life. And that transitions into my next point. This is a terrible video, but I'm going to post it anyway. I'm all over the place. So the next point is what made John, like what shaped him, according to the myth, is, his whole life he had self-determination. He didn't choose the circumstances he was in or why he worked or what he worked. He was determining, though, that he did work, and he would do it not for his own gain, but for the gain of his family, so that way they can live and go to the doctor and such. So really, it's about self-determination. And in the end, that is what kind of connects to Jung, is his biggest positive, we'll say, like his defining factor wasn't ego, right, which everybody's like, oh wow, that guy's egotistical. It's not ego. He wasn't very egotistical. He sounded sure of himself, but that's because, in reality, he kind of was the guy. But his self-determination eventually turned into obsession. He was going to beat this machine. He literally says, I'm going to die with my hammer in my hand, right? So that's where the shadow kind of comes into play, where he has sort of like a bit of a pride, but also a lot of obsession with, I need to beat this steam drill. And that's ultimately what causes his death, and what frames the whole sacrifice angle is, well, because he wasn't like integrated in like the full aspect of his personality. Not to say he didn't need to sacrifice himself. That makes the story interesting. But in reality, for what he was doing it for, sacrificing himself was not necessary. But in terms of the story, I get it. It's a literary device. It's not too literal. I mean, but the real question is, did John Henry win? Right? I mean, from the story, you might get the idea, oh yeah, he won the contest. But did he win the contest? Right? He died after. The machine still kept going, at least in most tellings. Some tellings, the machine blows up. But there's still other machines. And it doesn't matter, because the machine doesn't necessarily represent one machine so much as it means, like in this story, the progress of industrialization and steam engines, which eventually became gas engines and electric engines and diesel and all kinds of other types of ways to do things. So yeah, did he win? Some would say yeah, he won, and some would say no, it was a personal win, but in the long scale, he didn't win. But I think that's a cool question, sure. But I think the really important question is, did he win / beat the machine / beat the impersonal force because he captured our imagination? He got us to think about what he represented, right? No machine, nobody here is going to look at a machine and like relate and be like, oh, I get where that machine was coming from. That machine was thinking this, that, and the other. No, there's no connection. But with John Henry, I think a lot of people can connect with his determination and his ability and self-sacrifice. They're like, wow, this guy really went the extra mile to make sure people around him were going to have a good life and have opportunity. And he did it by sacrificing his life. He like went full on hero archetype, savior archetype a little bit. And people loved it. In the story, at least, people are cheering for him, and they're like, oh, wow. And I think that's because they see John Henry almost like an extension of themselves. And I guess, that's where I'm like, I don't know. I think John Henry won, not by traditional means, though, but by doing the one thing, I was going to say computer, but a machine / impersonal force can't do, and that's actually connect and actually use imagination to its advantage. Reason why I said it's kind of a hot topic now with all the new advancements going on. People are like, oh my gosh, what's going on with all the jobs? We're going to be broke, and the machines are going to do all the work, and who knows, it's uncertain. But I think the thing to keep in mind, to keep from dipping too far into doomerism, is kind of like, well, they don't have everything, right? A lot of people are going to be able to tell and care. That's the main thing. Care. Who made this? Why did they make this? Can I connect with that? Do I see a little bit of that in myself? Or do I want to see more of this in the world? It's like a good thing. I think that's kind of the takeaway from John Henry, I guess. I don't know. That's my first video. Wow, holy shit. I'm a bit of a psychologist. I'm a bit of a philosopher. Oh man, I'm here in my apartment with my orange cat. Do you think I probably should show Leo in the video? Because then I'll get more views. Just kidding. I don't do it for views. I mean, a little bit. I like to know that people are out there watching stuff. I don't know. It doesn't have to be my stuff. It could be Leo. Go check out my shorts and you'll see Leo. And that's 100% just because I love Leo so much. It feels good. I want to like take a picture of him and keep him in my wallet, a picture of him in my wallet, so I can show people and be like, this is my cat, by the way. Comment if you want to see more Leo videos. Okay, goodbye.